Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the MindSpa Podcast. We're your hosts, Tina and Michelle. Today, we're going to go over a few more Am I the A-hole scenarios. So I'll go with the first one. Am I the a-hole for backing out of letting my brother move in after I already promised he could? So I, a 36-year-old male, have an older brother, 39-year-old male, who is going through a pretty rough divorce. About 6 months ago, when things started falling apart, he called me late one night after another fight with his wife. He was convinced she was going to kick him out. Without really thinking, I told him, if it comes to that, you've got a guest room here. At the time, I meant it. I honestly thought if he stayed with us, it would be for a few weeks while he found an apartment. I also made one huge mistake. I never actually discussed it with my wife before making that promise. I mentioned it to her afterwards and she wasn't thrilled, but she basically said, we'll deal with it if it actually happens. I took this as an agreement. She says that she meant we to discuss it later. Fast forward to now, the divorce is finalized and my wife and I are on completely different places than where we were 6 months ago. After years of infertility and one miscarriage, she finally is pregnant. We're both excited, but she's also incredibly anxious. She's working from home, constantly sick, and honestly just wants our house to stay calm and predictable. Meanwhile, my brother has not been doing well. I love him, but every conversation comes back to the divorce. He drinks more than he used to. He calls me at 11 p.m. wanting to vent for an hour. And if I say I'm tired, he gets annoyed. He's also stayed over a couple nights already. One night, my wife found him smoking outside our back door after we'd specifically asked him not to because the smell makes her nauseous. He apologized, but it still upsets her. Last weekend, we were having lunch with my parents when my brother casually said, only 2 more weeks until I move in with you. I almost choked on my food. Apparently, he'd already given notice to his apartment because in his mind, this had been settled for months. I asked if we can talk privately later, but he kept pushing it. My mom immediately jumped in with, well, you did promise him. I said things had changed. He asked, what changed? I wasn't about to announce my wife's pregnancy at the dinner table because she isn't ready to tell people yet. So I just said, our situation at home is different now. He looked at me and said, you're seriously backing out? After we got home, my wife started crying. She admitted that she had been dreading this conversation for months, but didn't want to be the reason I fought with my brother. She said, I don't think I can handle him living here right now. And honestly, once she finally said it out loud, I realized I agreed. I don't think my brother would actually stay here for a few weeks. I think it would turn into months. He has no real plan beyond move into your guest room. The next day I called him. I apologized for making a promise. I told him that I couldn't have him move in anymore. I also offered to pay his security deposit and first 2 months rent somewhere else because I know he's taking a financial hit from the divorce. He got really quiet. He said, so your promise was only good until it became inconvenient. I told him it wasn't that simple. He said, I made a decision because I believed you. Then he hung up. Now my parents are involved. My mom thinks that I'm abandoning my brother when he needs me the most. My dad says my word should mean something, even if the timing is bad. A couple of relatives have called saying family should come first. My friends who know the whole situation think that I'd be crazy to move someone into the house when my wife is pregnant, stressed, and doesn't want a long-term house guest. The thing that keeps bothering me is that my brother really did rely on what I said. If I hadn't offered, maybe he would have made different plans months ago. But I also feel like my responsibility is to my wife first, especially now. So, am I the a-hole for breaking a promise to my brother because my circumstances have changed?
This is a juicy one. There's so much in here that I'm like loving to dig into. There's so much that's coming to my mind. Because number one, we hear this a lot in therapy where people say, I said this one thing. I feel differently or I think differently about the situation. I'm stuck. I'm always like, stuck. Why would we be stuck in this situation? I like to teach people the phrase, upon further consideration, I have a different conclusion than I did before. And so instead of, people often feel uncomfortable saying, change my mind or the situation changed, they avoid the conversation. And then that avoidance makes the problem bigger.
Right.
Because they feel like they're stuck, that they can't have that conversation. But it is always okay to change your mind. It's always okay to say yes, and then wait, I thought about it more, or the situation's changed, and it's actually no longer a no. So actually, I think the biggest problem is the fact that he didn't address it sooner with his brother after realizing I said yes, but this isn't necessarily going to work out. The second he found out she was pregnant, I didn't actually discuss this with my wife. So you say, hey bro, I know that we had this conversation and I really meant it when I was talking to you, but I realized I hadn't really discussed that with my wife. Give me some time to discuss this with my wife and I'll get back to you. Because that would have changed this entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also him realizing, would I make a decision from an emotional standpoint? You're calling me, it's late at night, you just finished arguing with your wife, and I'm gonna say something to you because I know that you're in an emotional state right now.
I care about you and I want to make you feel better.
Right. Like this is what brothers do, right? I'm here to support you. I think that there needs to be room as well too for the other brother to understand that maybe this was an emotional decision on his end. He made it in the heat of the moment because he knew that I was in need of that support. But then when rational and logical thinking set in, and you actually considered your unborn child and your wife and the home environment, I think that would help him look at it more balanced. Versus it looking at like, you promised me something and now all of a sudden you're backing down on your promise. Well, let's look at other people's perspective as well in all of this too. And it probably just was an emotional decision that he was making. And now he's actually looking at the facts about that too. But does that make it any different?
No, I think it does, though. I think it does. I think that will help people understand, yes, it's very common to make one decision in an emotional state. And that's why giving those conversations time for logic to kick in, because it is a completely different set of in your mind, whether or not you're contemplating things from an emotional side or logistical, rational side, and there should be room for both. So anybody who gets promised anything from a friend in an emotional, you should take a beat, let them think about it and not hold them to it.
Exactly. Because emotions change. They're going to be up and down. And so that's not as consistent as looking at this logically, looking at the facts, looking at, does this person have a plan beyond the first few weeks? I think that will help us make a more informed decision. I think that's what is often the missing link, I think, right? Where we just kind of make decisions in the heat of the moment. Versus like, give me a moment, let me think about it. I know you're in a rough place. I want to be able to support you. I have good intentions. Give me a moment to think about it. I think that moment of pause can make a huge difference in the preservation of some relationships. If we just kind of take a moment to pause before making some of these decisions.
I agree. I feel like there's this other little piece to it maybe, where the brother, the one who needed a place to stay, may have also kind of understood, I don't want to revisit this conversation again. He already said yes. So I feel like it was a little bit dodgy on the other brother's side to never bring it up again, because I'm sorry, before I put in my notice, I'm going to double check.
I'm going to be like, hey, so just so you know, my lease is up in a couple of weeks.
This is the timing. Not like, because usually you don't give 2 weeks notice for rent, which means you'd assume it's 4 weeks notice, likely. So for 2 weeks, he sat on the fact that he already gave notice and then only brought it up when it's like 2 weeks. And
can't wait to move in.
Coming to move in with you. So I feel like, and honestly, I think that maybe sometimes people do instinctually understand that when you get a yes in an emotional moment, maybe you don't want to revisit the conversation later in case it changes.
Case logic sets in.
The other brother might have avoided too. I think they both avoid it for completely different reasons. And then that exacerbated this issue into a bigger issue.
I mean, that speaks of the challenges of avoidance. It doesn't actually solve the issue.
It does not. It very often makes it a lot worse.
It makes it so much worse because we both know what we're avoiding. And then this brings us to this conversation, and now you're hanging up on me when we could have had this conversation with less emotions involved and actually found ourselves in a good place. But I also like that his brother is trying to compromise. The idea of paying the security deposit, paying 2 months rent. Like,
I mean, I think that's overly generous for sure.
He's really trying to find.
I think he is risking resentment if his brother actually takes him up on it. I could see him feeling feelings of resentment long term, because the brother who needs a place to stay would be taking that in a sense of like, you owe this to me, when I actually don't think he does. I don't think he owes it to him. I think it's a very generous, kind thing to do, but I don't think he owes it to him.
No, just because he changed his mind?
Nope.
No, we're adults here. I think he's the a-hole in that situation. I think he made an emotional decision.
Yeah.
And when logic set in, and his circumstance legitimately changed.
If I were him, I would be saying, okay, we're pregnant. You know what I mean? I understand she's not ready and all that kind of stuff, but it seems like some people do already know, which he kind of let be known in the thing, because he said the people that know the whole story.
Oh, they understand.
Right. And your brother doesn't know the whole story.
That's true.
So if some people already know the whole story, why can't your brother know the whole story?
This will be a good time to tell him.
There's another piece to this that we see all the time actually in these posts, which is why I actually think the majority of people post. My friends and family are saying I'm the asshole. I actually think that that's why they post, because they're like, I didn't think that I was. I was being really generous. My situation legitimately changed. The promise was made in one conversation, but we never had follow-up conversations. Like, they have a very valid point, but for some reason the family are getting involved. But not to like also take the brother in. So I always find that really fascinating that mom and dad have such strong opinions, but or uncles and friends have so much. Right. It's like, well, yeah, why is this falling on me? And they're all going to conveniently go back to but you promised.
But things changed.
Right. Well, why didn't you promise?
So we're here now.
My situation changed, so why aren't you stepping up now, right? And they're wanting to let themselves off the hook for having to participate, to help, to be uncomfortable, put themselves out, and then everyone puts the pressure on one family member as like, this is why it should be your responsibility. So
it's almost like however you spin it and whatever you do, you will be the a-hole in their eyes.
Yeah.
And so really that's not going to shift, because they've already created this one narrative or perspective and expectation of you. And if you're deviating from that, then you will be the a-hole in their eyes.
What's really hard in some family dynamics is potentially there's a version of this where everybody gets over it. Brother gets situated and sorted. Pregnancy becomes evident. I think the brother would still be like, why didn't you just tell me, dude?
Exactly.
I guess
that would make things easier, though.
It would make things if he would just tell them. But
I hope, at least.
There are also family dynamics where this is a permanent rift in the family. And I think that that's where a lot of the fear comes from, where people,
they don't want that.
They don't want that. So they do what they're not comfortable with to please the family. And then they end up with resentment, and they resent the family for forcing them into the situation. So he is kind of backed into a potential lose-lose situation, because the reality is, as reasonable as we see it, to say no,
they're always going to see him. They might continue to see him that way, but I think that's what can sometimes prevent people from establishing boundaries. Like, I don't want them to be mad at me. I don't want to lose that relationship. I'm just going to give them what they want. I'm going to be that yes person, and I'm going to, whatever my needs are or my family's needs are, I'm going to just overlook that and just be there for that person. But those are also dangerous territories, because then your family can resent
your wife and you are creating a bad dynamic, and that can last even longer.
And that's what his point is, right? Like, I think my job now is to protect my wife. And I think,
but he also doesn't want to throw her under the bus. My wife said no.
But we're having a baby.
I know.
Just tell him you're having a baby.
It does seem really simple, but we're prefacing this with the potential that the brother's going to be like, oh, okay, that makes total sense. But if he's the a-hole, then he might be like, so
you don't need nursery.
They just sleep in your room.
Sleep in your room for the
I'll
first
help
few months.
babysit. Like, so guy's in a tough spot.
He is in a tough spot.
I feel bad for him.
He is.
Are we ready for the next one?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Am I the a-hole for telling my parents they either need to treat all their grandkids equally or stop buying gifts altogether? I know this title sounds dramatic, but my family thinks I've completely overreacted. I, 34-year-old female, have 2 daughters, 8 and 5. My younger brother, 31-year-old male, has 1 son who is 6. Bear with me, you gotta flip the page. For some context, my parents are financially comfortable. They're retired, travel a lot, and they absolutely love being grandparents. None of us expected them to spend money on our kids. That's their choice. The problem isn't that they spend money, it's who they spend it on. When my nephew was born, my parents were over the moon because he was the first grandchild. My oldest daughter was born about 2 years later. They were excited, but not in the same way. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Then my second daughter was born, and the pattern just kept getting more obvious. For birthdays, my girls usually get a couple outfits, maybe a craft kit or a book. My nephew gets things like Nintendo Switch, a bike, hockey tickets, expensive Lego sets. You get the idea. Last Christmas really bothered me. My girls each got about 3 presents. They were grateful and happy. Then my nephew opened what felt like 20 gifts. One of them was a brand new gaming console. On the drive home, my oldest asked, why does Grandma always buy him more stuff than us? That broke my heart because I realized she'd noticed. I tried to brush it off, told her that Grandma and Grandpa love all 3 of them the same. I'm not sure I believed that when I said it. A few weeks ago, I finally asked my mom about it. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I genuinely wanted to know if there was a reason I was missing. She sighed and said, it's different. I asked what that meant. She said my nephew is carrying on the family name. I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She said, your brother is the only one who had a son. I reminded her that my daughters are also her grandchildren. She agreed, but kept saying it wasn't the same. I asked my dad later, hoping he'd have a different opinion. Instead, he basically said, your mother could have worded it better, but yes, your nephew is the last one to carry on the family name. For the record, our last name isn't rare. It's not attached to a family business or anything. It's just our last name. I left pretty upset. I talked to my husband that night, and he admitted he'd noticed the difference years ago, but didn't want to make a bigger issue. The thing that finally pushed me over the edge happened this past weekend. We were celebrating my nephew's birthday. My parents surprised him with a family trip to Disney. Not all the grandkids, just him. My youngest asked if she could come too. My mom laughed awkwardly and said, maybe another time. When we got home, both girls kept asking why they weren't invited. I called my parents. I told them I'm done pretending the favoritism isn't happening. I said they're free to spend their money however they want, but if they're going to make such an obvious difference between the grandkids, I'd rather they stop buying expensive gifts altogether. Either keep things reasonably equal or just give everyone something small. My mom got really upset. She said I was trying to tell her how to spend her own money. My dad accused me of making this about money. I told him it wasn't about the dollar amount. It's about 3 kids sitting in the same room watching one of them constantly get treated differently. My brother then called me. He actually agreed that our parents probably favor his son, but that I should let it go because it's not hurting anybody. I asked if he'd feel the same way if the situations were reversed. He got quiet, changed the subject. Now my parents aren't speaking to me, and a couple of relatives think I owe them an apology. Part of me wonders if I should have just stayed out of it. The other part of me thinks my 8-year-old can already see the favoritism, then pretending everything is fine isn't helping anyone. So, am I the a-hole?
I think it's helpful for her to be able to bring this up because she's advocating on behalf of her daughters. And that's where it becomes important to realize that these kids can pick up on favoritism, can pick up on different types of treatments sometimes before the parents themselves can.
Yeah.
Or even the grandparents in this case can actually notice that. I wonder though, like if she didn't bring this up now and this consistently persisted, what would that look like for the granddaughters and their grandparents? At some point, I'm thinking they'll grow resentment.
Yeah.
Because they're noticing it. It's not like it's not obvious. They're noticing it. They're questioning. Yeah. It's impacting their view of self. Like, are we not as worthy as he is? Yeah. Are we not as deserving as he is? I don't know. I think that that's an important piece because that also sets a tone for them too, right? In terms of like how they interact with the world around them. If this is how grandparents are seeing us as not being equal, then what does that even mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you see this in a lot of different family dynamics because I think that when you see all of these combined families where there's divorce and that type of stuff, and you have biological grandkids versus step grandkids and all that, I think this can be relatable for a lot of people because there's a lot of different circumstances where favoritism can kind of show up in family dynamics. And addressing it with them, I think it's right to address something that you see with family. I don't think anybody should ever be questioning, am I the problem because I brought it up? And I think that is, I think it can be not an unhealthy family dynamic if whoever brings up the problem that's really obvious to everybody, the elephant in the room, becomes the actual problem instead of the
jealous
issue that they're bringing up. And even, let's say it is jealousy. Let's go with sure. What does that change? It changes nothing of the situation. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're being unfair. My jealousy is coming from your unfair actions. Me being jealous doesn't actually make your actions not unfair.
So then at what point, I guess, does it, so the mom's piece was that, or the family rather, was that daughter is trying to control how we spend our money and what we do with our money?
Is a sneaky change the object of the argument. Do you know what I mean? Because that's the easiest way to make her look like she's being the problem.
You're jealous and you're controlling.
Yeah, you're trying to control how I spend my money. I would be like, and again, she was trying to be very clear. I'm not trying to, like, that's not what this is about, but that's inconvenient to the parents. Because what it actually is about, and they did admit to it, interestingly, but they feel justified in it.
Yeah. Like they were clear with what their reasoning was.
We are favoring. Yeah, and that's why.
But is there no concern about the messaging that you're sending?
Clearly, there is no concern about that.
Granddaughters, like that's the part that's...
And now it's making mom question whether or not she should let her kids experience that.
Yeah.
At one family event, let's go with one of those situations where like maybe it's a sweet and they're 10 and they're like, they got something big. I just got something small for my last birthday. And you're like, well, you were 9, they're 16. And so with the presumption that everybody gets that kind of present when they're 16, it'll be equal for you. And that is fine for them to experience the disappointment in that moment of I'm 10 and I'm seeing the difference and I'm upset. To me, our kids have to experience disappointment and they have to experience unfairness. And our job is not to go out and fix all those issues, but that's not what this is.
This is like
chronic, constant favoritism that is like blatantly in their face, but they're really putting it in these girls' faces. They're seeing it.
Yeah.
Mom didn't bring it up to them because again, I think that's not a great idea. Let's say you're an adult, you see it, but you can tell your kids are absolutely oblivious to it. I would actually keep my mouth shut about that. But the second your kids start to notice, we know the self-esteem impact that can have. And I don't think that that's great parenting to sit by and say nothing and not try to intervene on their behalf when you know that it's going to develop self-esteem issues.
Yeah, they're going to navigate the world wondering, am I less than, right? If I'm a male or if I'm not a male or if I don't care, like what are their criteria to make me feel less than? But then mom being able to advocate, have that conversation with grandparent also teaches the kids that like speak up.
Yeah.
When there are things that you're noticing that don't align with what your values are, like speak up in those moments.
Yeah. She's modeling good behavior for the
Absolutely.
kids. Yeah.
100%. And I think that's the beautiful thing in all of this. But then the question then becomes, where do we go from here? Right? Like, do we continue to expose ourselves to this because we want to build a family relationship? Do they just not open gifts in front of each other? Because we know that there is going to be a discrepancy in the value of each of the gifts. I think that becomes the next piece.
I think she needs to focus on what she can control 100% within herself and not be trying to tell the parents what to do. I understand why she thought that was a good solution and why she suggested that solution, but I would just suggest going, well, what can you control? So that might be, I'm not celebrating birthdays jointly. I'm not celebrating Christmas jointly. We'll do our own little gift exchange. We'll not be present anymore when my nephew is opening gifts.
We're not exposing our kids to that.
Anymore.
Yeah.
That you can 100% control. They could probably work around it. But again, if that did happen, then you take the steps that you need to address that behavior. Wonder what the parents would say if she's like, well, what if my daughters promised to keep their last name and not change their, because you don't have to change your last name when you get married. What does that change?
Yeah. I guess you're thinking like the name continues, right? The granddaughter's kids would still have.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. What's your excuse now? Because I don't actually think it has anything to do with the name. I think it has to do with the fact that he's a boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're trying, I don't know, they're making some weird rationale.
Because you're thinking that he's going to carry on the family's name.
Yeah.
Like his kids, his grandkids are also going to have the family's name.
Like, okay, well, I'll let my husband know when we get married, we're keeping my name and our children taking my name. Or we're going to do a double-barreled hyphenated last name. Therefore, our name will continue. Yay.
Where the generations come in, the difference in generations come into play. Their ability to be open-minded and to see what does that change, the name piece. Are there other family things that can be maintained, like the legacy or the tradition and cultures that we know are going to continue on throughout? Because like the mom said, there's no family business or anything special about the name. It's probably a very common name, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like that's going to be a game changer, but are there other things that we can instill that we know are going to be carrying forward, like values and morals? I don't know.
Yeah.
Can we start there?
Like slightly more important. Not the a-hole for being upset, not the a-hole for advocating for her daughters, and could use focusing more on the behaviors that she has 100% control over. Like, nope, no, now I'm not. You know what? Sorry for making that recommendation. Upon further consideration, do whatever you want with these gifts. However, the boundary that I'm putting in place is that we will no longer be present when my nephew is opening gifts. That's
she needs to do that. Yeah, just protect those babies because they're not changing.
And we can give them options. We can come to the event, but gifts can be done afterwards, or we don't come to the event. If they misstep during an event and they surprise, we're opening gifts now, and it's like, well, you said you were going to do this later, now you're trying to do it in front of us. Then you set the boundary of like, we're no longer going to be present for these events. You don't have to cut off the relationship, but you can say, we're not going to be around these people anymore. And if you're going to take issue with that, then you have to own you taking issue with my decision.
Exactly.
But I set a boundary, you're not respecting it, there are consequences when you don't respect it. I'm not going to be around as much.
Yeah, that needs to happen.
And we're going to interact in different ways.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.